In this video, we are going to discuss the life and works of Marina Popovich. Marina Popovich was a distinguished female test pilot and cosmonaut of the Soviet Union. She would break over 100 aviation records in over 40 different aircraft. She was the third woman to break the sound barrier and the first woman to do it from the Soviet Union. Marina Popovich was also one of the leading ufologists to come from the Soviet Union. UFO culture was not permitted under communist rule, and when the Soviet Union fell in 1991, Marina was one of many former Soviet pilots and cosmonauts to discuss their UFO experiences and the reality of the UFO phenomena. From Marina and her colleagues, we can learn that UFOs are not strictly an American phenomena, but a global and complex one. So who was Marina Popovich? What did the UFO movement look like under communist rule? And what did the Soviet intelligence services know about the UFO phenomena?
And when he approached the Mars, the spacecraft,
вот это последний снимок.
we have here the last picture
Он
of
уже
this
пришел в
spacecraft.
марсианское небо, уже пришел.
So when he approached the Mars and was close to the Mars, and here we can see Phobos, a satellite.
И вдруг пришла вот такая фотография, и кроме этой фотографии еще была тень на Марсе. Тень.
Okay, and on this picture, this one of the last pictures, we can see here strange object, and also one of the pictures shown a big shadow on the surface of the Mars.
Я Михеева Ира, я Гераськин Вадим, я Горская Наталья, вступаю в ряды Всесоюзной пионерской организации имени Владимира Ильича Ленина. Перед лицом своих товарищей торжественно отвечаю: горячо любить свою родину, жить, учиться, не бороться, как завещал великий Ленин. Свободу
Marina Popovich was born Marina Vasilyeva on July 20th, 1931, in Smolensk Oblast on the western border of the Soviet Union. She would live the first part of her life as any other child of the Soviet Union, assisting with field work, becoming a young pioneer, and getting indoctrinated into becoming a champion of communism. She was fortunate in that her district was far from those affected by the famines that plagued Ukraine and the Caucasus of 1931. This life she knew would soon change, however, when Adolf Hitler would break the non-aggression pact he had with Stalin and invade Russia in June of 1941 during Operation Barbarossa. Caught off guard, the Soviets would lose much territory in the initial stages of the operation, and at the age of 10, Marina was forced to flee with her family to the inland city of Novosibirsk. Nazi ideology viewed the Slavic people as less than humans, meant to be the slaves of the Aryan people after the war. Because of this view, the Nazis were particularly brutal in their treatment of the Soviet people, and by the end of the war, German losses would account to 6 million military and civilian personnel compared to the Soviet losses of 20 million military and civilian personnel. And Marina Popovich would later say that the need for revenge at seeing the utter destruction of her people and country would motivate her to pursue a career as a fighter pilot. Marina would also draw inspiration from her uncle, who was a pilot in the Soviet Air Force during the war, and from a new brigade of female bomber pilots called the Night Witches. Prior to the war, females did not fly in the Soviet Air Force, but due to the dire situation placed on Stalin by Hitler's invasion, he began to allow females to fly. The Night Witches would help turn the tide of the war and eventually began to be feared by name by the German military and Air Force. Eventually, the Allies of World War II would push back Hitler's forces and defeat them. Once the Axis powers were completely defeated, people all across the Soviet Union began to celebrate the end of their horrible fate. However, amongst the world leaders, they knew a new Cold War was brewing, and Stalin would find a renewed enemy in the West. World War II had proven that much of the battlefield had moved to the sky, and Stalin did not want to be caught off guard again, so the Soviet Union began to appropriate resources towards rapidly improving their air and space capabilities. Following the war, Marina was determined to become a pilot, a goal that had once again become difficult for women. She lied and said she was 22, when in reality she was 16. She wrote to Soviet Marshal Clement Voroshilov, asking to be admitted to a flying school. Voroshilov intervened on her behalf and she was admitted to the Novosibirsk Aviation Technicum, where she graduated in 1951. Initially she worked as an engineer, then later as a flying instructor, but by the 1960s, Popovich was a military test pilot. During her career, she tested more than 50 airplanes and broke more than 100 aviation world endurance records, including the longest ever flight by a female pilot. She was the first woman to break the sound barrier in an MiG-21, earning her the nickname Madam MiG. 10 of her record-breaking flights were undertaken alone in the Soviet Antonov An-22, the world's heaviest turboprop plane. In 1962, Marina claims to have had her first UFO encounter while flying. She claims that a bright orb flying incredibly fast and making no sound followed her as she flew. The Soviet government did not allow for civilian UFO groups to exist or for people to speak publicly about their experiences. There was a brief period in 1967 when UFO groups and discussions were allowed, but this was just a tactic by the Soviet government to hide their illegal test of putting nuclear bombs into orbit, something which all nuclear-armed countries had signed a treaty saying they would not do. Thousands of Soviet citizens began reporting their UFO sightings. Once the Soviet Union realized that these reports could also describe their new weapons test, they closed all mention of UFOs publicly and once again banned UFO groups and UFO discussion. Marina Popovich claims that people who tried to talk in public about UFOs were either fired or put into a psychiatric hospital. Despite the pressure, civilian ufologists still existed in the Soviet Union, hidden from the government, led by a man named Dr. Felix Siegel. There was a vast underground network that collected data and produced pamphlets on the UFO phenomena. These pamphlets were called samizdat, Russian for self-published, and were often printed with espionage techniques of using invisible ink and carbon paper. They were only distributed to trusted members of these circles as to not risk getting sent to the gulags. Marina would continue flying as a test pilot. She was decorated dozens of times over. During the Soviet era, she was awarded the Hero of Socialist Labor. She also bore the Order of the Red Banner, the Order of the Red Star, the Order of the Badge of Honor, and the Order of the Gold Star. She eventually began training with the first group of female cosmonauts. Ultimately, she was not chosen to go into space. She would marry fellow cosmonaut Pavel Popovich.
This is Movie Time. Leslie Mitchell reporting. The orbiting Major Nikolaev and his partner Colonel Popovich have gone on creating record after record. Apparently, their mission is to test the reactions of the human body to weightlessness over a prolonged period of several days.
Pavel Popovich was the fourth cosmonaut in space and the sixth person in orbit. Him and Marina would discuss their own UFO encounters in private. And in 1982, Marina Popovich had her second UFO encounter while on safari in the Pamir Mountains of Soviet Kazakhstan. She claims that 3 bright orbs flew over her campsite and shined a beam of light onto her group. She was confident that these objects were not planes or helicopters, as they made no sound, and she was sure that they were UFOs. She took this as a sign to dedicate her life to exploring the UFO phenomena once she had retired from the Soviet Air Forces, and the opportunity to do so publicly would present itself in 1991.
Good evening. The stunning overthrow of Mikhail Gorbachev by communist hardliners dominates the news this Monday. Gorbachev was reported under house arrest as Soviet tanks took up positions throughout Moscow.
The chief state TV channel was halfway through its evening news when it got the first details of the agreement signed in Minsk. Quoting from it, the anchorwoman announced, "The Soviet Union, as a subject of international and geopolitical reality, no longer exists."
Following the fall of the Soviet Union and the new openness of media and the press, Marina, her now ex-husband Pavel Popovich, and many other former cosmonauts and pilots began to openly discuss their UFO encounters. Pavel Popovich would reveal that he had joined the Russian Academy of Sciences' newly created All-Union Investigation Committee for Anomalous Aerial Phenomena, and he became head of the Academy's UFO Commission. This was an official investigation of UFOs undertaken by the Soviet government during a time when the Soviet government strictly prohibited any civilian UFO group investigations. Pavel Popovich would go on to become the president of the UFO Association of Russia, and he would also go on television to detail one of his UFO encounters.
У меня возникло такое желание, я сидел возле иллюминатора, посмотреть в иллюминатор. Я посмотрел, и у меня, значит, глаза вот такие сразу стали. Смотрю рядом, практически где-то, километра, может быть, 1,5 от нас. И где-то, может быть, может быть, на 1000 метров выше летит объект. Причем правильной треугольной формы, равнобедренный треугольник, белый, ярко-белый. Я летчик-истребитель, я знаю многие типы летательных аппаратов, но это ни на что не было.
Marina began to speak around the world about the reality of the UFO phenomena. In 1991, she would come to America, where she spoke at conferences in San Francisco and Los Angeles about UFOs and her own personal UFO encounters. The Los Angeles Times published an article on November 30th, 1991, about Marina's recent UFO speeches. In the article, Marina states that pilots were afraid to say a word about UFOs because they'd be sent straight to the loony bin. And for 25 years now, there have been secret studies by the Ministry of Defense into the matter. The article also highlights that as well as being a decorated test pilot, Marina also has a doctorate degree in flight technology from the University of Leningrad, and thus would have the proper knowledge to properly observe and analyze the UFOs from her own encounters. In that same year, Marina published the book Ufo Glasnost, which detailed what she knew about UFOs from her own experience and that of her colleagues. In this book, she states the following: Soviet military and civilian pilots have reported over 3,000 UFO sightings to the Soviet government. The KGB had recovered fragments of 5 crashed UFOs. The crash sites were Tunguska, Novosibirsk, Tallinn, Ordzhonoye-Kielce, and Dalingorsk. The KGB believed that the reported UFO crash and then cover-up in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 was a genuine UFO crash. Phobos 2, a Soviet space probe sent to investigate the surface of Mars and its moons, discovered strange monolithic structures on the surface, and a UFO can be seen entering the probe's camera before all communications were lost. For the remainder of her life, Marina would continue to give speeches and interviews promoting broader discussion of the reality of the UFO phenomena. In her final TV appearance on Russian TV in 2012, she reiterated her previous claims she had made regarding UFOs. Marina Popovich died on November 30th, 2017, and she was buried with military honors at the Federal Military Memorial Cemetery. Marina Popovich was a pilot with over 6,000 hours spent in the air. Her experience in the skies and knowledge of aircraft present her as one of the most credible people to publicly say that the UFO phenomena is real and needs to be addressed by society. From her, we also learn of the stigmas and pressures placed on pilots who encounter UFOs. Many pilots do not come forward with their UFO encounters due to fear of ridicule. Hopefully, thanks to the bravery of pilots like Marina Popovich and more recently Commander David Fravor, more pilots will come forward with their UFO encounters. We also learned that UFOs are a global phenomena from Marina and her work. Marina Popovich was a highly decorated and celebrated pilot who helped push the limits of aviation within her own lifetime. This, along with her promotion of UFOs, will make her legacy be felt for years to come.